Today we have for you is Rielle the Everwise. Rielle the Everwise gets a 1/0 for each instant and sorcery card in our graveyard. And whenever we discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, we'll draw that many cards. So, the game plan here is to discard all of our instant sorceries as possible, as many as we can, into our graveyard and drawing cards on each turn. So we'll be able to do this 4 times around the table, as much as we possibly can. Let's get into it. For all the sorcery cards we're going to be playing, we're going to be wanting to give them flash, which means we can cast them at instant speed. So we'll be able to utilize and get extra value from our sorcery cards. Normally we'll be able to play them specifically on our turn, but we'll start playing them on opponents' turns. So that'll be helpful to get a lot of value from. Step through a sorcery as return 2 target creatures to their owner's hands. That's great and all. It's okay removal. It's not fantastic. But what we really care about is wizard cycling. It's pay 2, discard this card, draw a card from Rielle, if it's the first card we've discarded this turn, and then we'll tutor for Harmonic Prodigy. That way we'll have this to utilize to double Rielle's ability. So if an ability of a shaman or a wizard, which Rielle is, you control will trigger that ability additional time. So if we discard 3 cards, we'll draw 3, trigger additional time, draw 3 more. So discard 3, draw 6. That's pretty darn good. We've got Recalibrate to return a Rielle or Harmonic Prodigy back to our hand. We've got Wonder. If we discard Wonder, which is what we're looking to do, we're going to give all of our creatures flying. We typically go through half of our deck each game, so we're looking at having a 50% chance of casting and having Wonder in our graveyard. Incendiary Command is pretty good. There's a lot of text here, so we'll go through it as slow as I can. Incendiary Command will deal 4 damage to target player, or 2 damage to each creature, or destroy target non-basic land, or each player discards all the cards in their hands, then draws that many cards. So with Rielle out, you're getting a ton of value by you're discarding your whole hand and then drawing twice your hand size. That's what we're going to be doing every single time, especially while Rielle is out. And then we can, because she's a 0/3 when she starts, we can do the 2 damage to each creature on the battlefield, destroying a lot of tokens or destroying a non-basic land like a Shrine to Nyx or a Rogue's Passage. Something that's going to be nasty and not helpful for our game plan will make it harder for everyone else. Let's see, and then we've got draw 4 cards and then put them into your hand, then discard 3 cards at random from your hand. Goblin Lore is super flavorful, super good card. I truly appreciate this. This is a good find in a, let's see, Convention Booster. That's right, that's where I got that from. Mystery Boosters are awesome. Illuminate History is nice. You discard all the number of cards, any card in your hand, and then draw that many cards. Then if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, create a token. That's a 3/2 white spirit creature token. We've got Cathartic Reunion. Additional cost to this, just discarding 2 cards, drawing 3 cards. Nice and simple. Breakthrough, a little confusing, so we'll go through this one slower. You pay X into it. You pay blue into it. For how much you cast for X, that's how many cards you're going to keep in your hand. So let's get into this. Draw 4 cards, then choose X cards in your hand, discard the rest. So for however much you pay X, that's how many cards you are going to keep in your hand. So for instance, you have 1 card in your hand, just one. You pay 1 here, you're going to be able to keep 1 card in your hand. So you're going to draw 4, and then you're going to keep the 1 card in your hand, right? And then you're going to discard 4. Real simple. Faithless Looting is draw 2, then discard 2. Flashback is nice. We'll be able to do that a couple times in order to have some value. And getting instants and sorceries out of our graveyard isn't the most optimal, but we have some options to get them back into our graveyard or back to our hand. Teferi's Puzzle Box is really nice, paired with our Niv Mizzet that we have here, or our Fists of Flame. We're looking at the beginning of each player's draw step. So every player, that player puts the cards in his or her hand, however many cards they have in their hand, either on top of their library or the bottom of their library. Then they will draw that many cards. So you'll get draw triggers every turn. So if you're discarding 7 cards, you're going to deal 7 damage or get 7 triggers for your draws here. Pretty nice. Thought Flare, we have draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards. Nice and simple. We have Cathartic Pyre. It's nice to have some options, you know, deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, have a little bit of removal, or discard 2 cards, draw 2 cards, discard 1 card, draw 1 card. You'll be doubling the value with that with Rielle. Desperate Ravings, draw 2, and then discard at random. Random is not the end of the world if you discard your Harmonic Prodigy or Niv Mizzet. We're going to be churning through so much of our deck anyways that we can't just be married to one specific game plan. We've got to be able to think on our toes, especially because Rielle is going to be getting removed. Our bigger creatures are going to be getting removed, and that's okay. We're just going to keep moving along and keep churning through the deck, and we'll have answers as they come. Flashback, once again, is really nice. And then Fateful Shadow. Showdown. Fateful Showdown. Let me correct myself. Deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of cards in your hand. Discard all the cards in your hand. Draw that many cards. Wow, we've got a wheel on this card, and we have some serious burn. Or removal. I mean, if they got a big baddie, you got to get rid of it. You got to get rid of it. It's not really feel bad if I have to take out a 14/14 with this. That won't make me feel too bad. I'll feel like a hero, honestly. If I'm removing creatures in red-blue and the guy who's playing mono black in front of me doesn't have answers, I am the hero at the table. I'm pointing at myself right now. I love that card. It's so good. Practical Research, draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant or sorcery. Pretty much the same as Thought Flare. Rights of Refusal, the only counter spell in the deck, but it's so good. Discard any number of cards from your hand and counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 for each discarded card this way. So it's just 1 bit of removal. Subira. All right, so the only reason we have Subira here in the deck is because she is a 5-drop wheel. So you got the 3 converted mana cost, 2 activated ability. She has haste, so you can do it right away. So pay the 2, tap, discard your hand until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I would not recommend getting in too early with Rielle because we're playing more of a mind-long game here with Rielle and into mid-range of getting a lot of value, pinging your opponents to death from exterior sources within the deck. We're getting into a couple more of them here as we go through the deck, so just a moment. Bedlam Reveler. I typically end up casting this guy for 4 because his spell costs 1 less for each instant or sorcery in our graveyard. I'm very impatient when I want to cast Bedlam Reveler because of his enter ability is when he enters, you discard your hand, draw 3 cards. If you've just casted your Rielle, on the turn you casted it, if we've ramped right, we have already casted a instant to draw a couple cards, discard a couple cards. So we might have 1 or 2 instants or sorceries in our graveyard already. And that way we're casting Bedlam Reveler on turn 4, entering the battlefield, discarding our hand, drawing 3 cards. So we're getting value significantly. Discarding our hand, we're going to have 7 cards. So we're going to discard 7. We're going to draw 7, and then we're going to draw 3 from Bedlam Reveler. Pretty awesome in combination with our commander. Moonveil Regent, super awesome card out of Midnight Hunt. Great chase mythic, if I do say so myself, being a 4-drop dragon, 4/4 flyer, of course. And whenever we cast a spell, we can discard our hand. If we do, we're going to draw a card for each of that spell's colors. So if we cast a 2-color spell, blue, red, we're going to draw 2 cards, essentially from that spell's colors. But then we're also going to draw cards from discarding our hand. So we have the 7 cards in our hand. We're going to draw 9 effectively. Very nice. And then when he dies, he'll do X damage to any target where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So when he dies, he'll just Pyroclasm. It's pretty sweet. 2 damage to each creature. Pretty sweet. Voracious Dragon. Awesome old school looking art here with a D&D look to it. But this is from Origins Chase Mythic here that I really love and appreciate. Flying, at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. So 2 cards a turn is pretty sweet. But at the beginning of your end step, you're going to discard your hand. This is great. You'll discard your whole hand and wheel. So you'll throw all the instant sorceries into your graveyard, and then you'll draw an effectively 7-14 cards here. Very nice. We have Backdraft Hellkite, and he has flying 4/4 again, and whenever he attacks, each instant and sorcery card in my graveyard will gain flashback until end of turn. Flashback will be equal to the converted mana cost of the card in the graveyard. So we have a couple cards in there with flashback in our graveyard already, but that way we can go ahead and if we don't have anything directly in our hand as a resource available, we can start utilizing our graveyard as a resource for things we've discarded in the past. When we cast with flashback, we will be exiling them from our graveyard, so they won't return to the graveyard, but that's okay. We won't need them per se because we'll keep churning out more value. So it's you pay a little bit up front, but you get a bigger reward here in the end. Dragon Mage, one of the most expensive cards in our deck. As far as converted mana costs, 7-drop dragon, flying 5/5. That's not even the reason why we have him, though. We have this man right here to go ahead and wheel us every time he enters the battlefield, or deals combat damage to a player. Excuse me. Whenever Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. When you're discarding your opponent's hands and you're making them draw 7 cards, oh my goodness, are you getting under their skin? Whether it's exiling someone's graveyard, making them discard cards, or removing their permanents, you are getting to their game plan. You are affecting their strategy. When you affect someone's strategy, not only makes you a target, however, it disrupts their game plan, affecting what's called their tempo, their timing, their efficiency, their game plan, their strategy. And that's why he's in the deck. Gives you a lot of time to get to your deck and churn out your resources so that way you can effectively win the game. It's very helpful for you. Forgotten Creation, he has Skulk. He can't be blocked by creatures with greater power than him, which is nice. Get in for 3 damage at a time. That's great. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you may discard all the cards in your hand. If you do, draw that many cards. So this is a May, so if you don't have any cards, you're not going to discard anything. If you want to, if you don't have Rielle out and you don't want to have the lack of value, it's just a nice option to keep churning through your deck more effectively. And to be able to just draw an additional 7 right at the beginning of your turn right there, it's going to be great. And I say 7 all the time is because we're going to be constantly filling our hand full of cards. There's not going to be a time very often, unless we have a bad shuffle, and it just happens, that we're going to have an opportunity where we're not going to have any cards in hand. But that being said, when we're getting rid of cards in our hand, we have Glinthorn Buccaneer. He has haste. He's a 2/4. Whenever we discard cards, he's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. We're going to be discarding more than 40 cards, I can tell you right now. And if he's out early game, it's not looking good for anybody who isn't planning to remove him. You can pay the 2 on him as well to discard another card, and you can draw a card off of this. This ability, it will only be able to activate while he's attacking. So essentially like Boast from Kaldheim, you attack with him, you pay the 2, you discard a card, you draw a card, and then it's just activated only while he's attacking. Jasev's Archivist, way better, of course, than the Dragon Mage in here, who's the 7-drop, but very similar ability. He's just a 3-drop 2/2 wizard here, and you pay 1 into him, you tap him, and each player will discard all the cards in their hand. They'll draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. Although this is going to take a long time for this spell to resolve, because let's be honest, you're going to play it, you're going to wait your turn, go to the next player's turn cycle. We're going to get all the way back to your turn. We're going to pay the 1, tap it. Each player will discard all the cards in their hand. They're going to draw cards equal to however many cards you have in your hand. And yeah, that'll take a little bit to resolve, but it'll be worth it. You'll have almost double, triple the cards in your hand that you started with that turn, and everybody will be confused and wondering what the heck is going on. So confusion's the name of the game sometimes. In a nice way, in a respectable way. The wheel way. We have Fist of Flames here, instance. So these spells that we're getting into are value engine, things that are helping promoting synergies between all of our cards in our deck, and it'll be illustrated very clearly through all this handful of cards I have here. Each time we draw, so we'll draw a card first off with this instant, a Fist of Flame. Until end of turn, target creature will gain trample and 1/0 for each card you've drawn this turn. if we're drawing those 14, 20 plus card turns, this is going to be lethal commander damage with Rielle instantly. I mean, even with Trample, they can have a 5/5 out, and we're going to have Rielle be a plus what's in her graveyard and giving her Trample, almost a 40/40 typically when we're in the late game and we've cast Fist of Flame late. It's really nice, and we can potentially copy it too to even get even more value. Double Vision, whenever we cast our first instant or sorcery spell each turn, we can choose new targets for the copy. So we can double the amount of spells that we're casting to get additional bonuses. Whenever we draw a card with Ominous Sea, we'll put a Foreshadow counter on it. If it has 8 or more Foreshadow counters on it, we'll remove those, and then we'll create an 8/8 Kraken. Otherwise, if I don't know really why we wouldn't ever play this. It has cycling. If you really want to get that extra value for draw cards that turn, you can. But I would honestly always just cast this enchantment because it's a distraction, similar to our Planeswalker that we have in the deck. It's just going to go ahead and give the opponent something to, really just think about. Oh, great, they're going to be creating 8/8s every turn. Oh, now I'm going to have to deal with those. I'm going to have the removal and spot removal for that. I'm going to have answers to that. So you're going to make them think about that while you're still wheeling away and doing your own thing. You're creating these threats for them to deal with. Jace's Sanctum is pretty nice. Just simply, your instants and sorceries are going to cost 1 less, and then whenever you cast your instants and sorceries, you're going to start scrying. So I'll give you a little bit of card advantage there and opportunity. So if you need some lands specifically, you need more instants and sorceries specifically, you need creatures specifically, you're going to start to be able to churn through the top of your library and look for those answers. Kinetic Augur, Enigma Drake, Crackling Drake, all these guys here have one thing in common. Their power is equal to the instants and sorcery cards in our graveyard, similar to our commanders. These guys are the embodiment of our commander right here. So Kinetic Augur has Trample, and then whenever he enters the battlefield, you'll discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. So we'll discard 2, and we'll draw 4 essentially with Rielle out. Enigma Drake, Flyer, the power is equal to the number of instant sorcery cards in our graveyard. Crackling Drake, Flyer, power is equal to the amount of instant sorcery cards in the graveyard and the cards you own in exile. That's a good point too. The instants and sorceries you own with like Flashback or whatever instants and sorceries went to exile when you cast like Past in Flames and stuff like that. Whenever he enters the battlefield, you'll draw a card as well, a little bit of extra value. Sprite Dragon, probably my second favorite card in the whole entire deck from Ikoria, absolute banger. Green-red, wow, blue-red, Flying Haste, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Sprite Dragon. Absolute banger. Sorry to disrespect you like that, bud. We have Pyrohound is next up, and whenever we cast instant or sorcery spells, we'll put a 1/1 counter on him, and he has Trample. Pyroceratops also has Trample. Whenever we cast non-creature spells, we'll get a 1/1 counter. Spellgorger Weird, whenever we cast non-creature spells, we'll get a 1/1 counter on him. Heckma Sentinels, awesome card from Amonkhet. There's quite a few similar in likeness to him, but this was the best one that I had on me currently. And it's whenever you cycle or you discard a card, Heckma Sentinels will get 1/1 until end of turn. Great counter to, not counter per se, but synonym to Prowess that we have here in the deck. So we have Storm Chaser Mage, Flying Haste, Prowess. So whenever we're casting non-creature spells, he's just getting a +1/+1 until end of turn. But that's no problem. He's a flyer. He's pretty good. Burning Prophet is whenever we're casting non-creature spells. They're going to be getting 1/0 until end of turn. And we're going to be scrying whenever they're casting non-creature spells too. Pretty helpful. Similar to Jace's Sanctum. And then Talryn Sky Summoner. Absolute banger in the deck who, whenever I get Talryn out, it's usually a pretty quick game because I'm going to be casting so many instants and sorceries that turns into my game plan effectively when I get a Talryn out. I'm just trying to get as much value as I can from him until he's effectively removed because he's not going to last that long, let's be honest. Whenever we're casting instant or sorceries, we're going to be getting 2/2 blue Drake creature tokens with flying. Having a bunch of 2/2s on the board with flying in this deck is extremely helpful. You're setting up yourself for extra turns with, well, not extra turns, but you're setting yourself up for effective turns with blockers and solid attackers.
Now, with all the draw that you've seen in this deck and discard, you can only imagine how impactful Niv Mizzet's going to be with having the flying 4/4, tapping himself, drawing a card. Whenever you're drawing a card, you're going to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Player is still effectively planeswalkers, so you can target planeswalkers as well. So planeswalkers, players, and creatures you can all target with the draw ability. Ruin Grinder is a 7/4 construct here with Menace, and when he dies, each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards. Not that you would ever want to do this, but you can mountain cycle him, searching for a mountain. If you really 100% absolutely need the ramp, it happens. It happens, so we're not going to cry over spilt milk, but he's much greater and more effective late game, of course. That's the more opportune way to use him, but we can effectively use him for ramp if we have to. Body of Knowledge, really great card I came across recently in Commander Legends. Body of Knowledge, power, and toughness are equal to the number of cards in my hand, and I have no maximum hand size. Whenever a Body of Knowledge is dealt damage, I'll draw that many cards. So he's about effectively a 14/14, and someone wants to block with him, I'm going to draw some cards. It's great value. Magic Mirror. So don't let the casting cost scare you here. I know it's 9, 6, and 3 blue. Ooh, scary. But we're in a 2-color deck. 2-color deck is not too bad to cast this. We're going to have the blue mana. I can almost guarantee that with a good hard shuffle here. It'll cost 1 less for each instant or sorcery in our graveyard. Most of the time when we're ready to cast Magic Mirror, if we have not discarded it, because there's going to be time where it's like, oh yeah, I already have maximum hand size. I'm chilling. I'm already drawing enough cards. I'm chilling. But if we need to churn out our library even faster and we need to effectively pump Rielle, like the time clock is ticking, any kind of draw power helps. Anything that's drawing me more cards to wheel out my deck quicker, that's what I need. You're paying 3 mana for that. That's why we're casting Magic Mirror. So at the beginning of our upkeep, we'll be putting knowledge counters on Magic Mirror and drawing a card for each counter on Magic Mirror. Magic Mirror has lasted me enough times to where I've had it out for 2-3 turns, and people are like, okay, that's enough draw, you're good. And I'm like, okay, thanks, dude. I didn't want to mill out. I appreciate that. We had an Elixir of Immortality here at one point. We had a Laboratory Maniac here at one point to prevent us from milling, and then if we milled, we win. But those win conditions and keeping me from winning are just so easy that if they'd wish to be added by the new owner of the deck, absolutely, please add those in. Those would be my recommendations wholeheartedly in order to bring this deck up to more of a competitive setting. This deck, as you've seen, is moderate to low power level, but just very impactful in the way it teaches somebody how to play through steps, phases, and even to combat, and playing on other people's turns, having more interaction, and really just moving along with everything that's meant to be in the deck of drawing, discarding, counting your graveyard, double checking your triggers, and then playing your turn, playing stuff on your opponent's turn. I'm pretty sure I said that, but I can't emphasize it enough. This is a really great deck to teach somebody how to play Magic. But moving on, we have Royal Scions. We're going to be having only one Planeswalker in this deck. It's a nice little distraction, but its +1 ability in the middle here is the most important. Target creature will get 2/0, gain first strike, and trample until end of turn. That is specifically for Rielle. Absolutely helpful, and can't praise it enough here. But of course, you have draw a card, discard a card. It synergizes. It's all right. We have instants and sorceries for that are more important because those are what actually get counted in the graveyard. Its negative is a great distraction for your opponents too. You're going to draw 4 cards with its -8 when you ultimate your Planeswalker here, and when you do, the Royal Scions, the Planeswalker, will deal damage equal to the number of cards in your hand. So you've drawn 4 cards this turn. You've drawn some additional cards with instant or sorcery that you've cast or creature that you've activated or played. Let's say you've drawn 10 cards this turn, and you already had 7 in your hand, so you're sitting about 17 cards. It's pretty likely, considering everything that we have here and played. We're going to deal about 17 damage to any target. Once again, removal is not so bad, and that threat of instant, 17 damage out of nowhere is pretty scary to your opponents. They're going to want to take this out quick. That's going to save your life total, and that's just the honest truth. It's going to protect you a little bit, similar to how a creature would. Seize the Storm and Experimental Overload, very similar cards. I like Seize the Storm better, new out of Midnight Hunt here. Got the nice foiling to it. These guys are creating creatures, tokens, for example. And the first one reads, create a red elemental creature token with trample. This creature's power and toughness equal to the number of instants and sorcery in your graveyard, plus the number of cards with flashback you own in exile. Super helpful. It also has flashback for 7. So you'll create these guys later in the game, of course. So you'll have 5 mana for about a 6/6, a 7/7, and it's equal to, and when it's in the quotations here, this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards you either own in exile with flashback or otherwise in your graveyard. That's telling you that it's going to tick up, just like Rielle, and it's going to get the +1/+1 every time you get another instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. If someone exiles your graveyard, you don't have a graveyard anymore, then you will effectively be at a 0/0, and the creature will be sacrificed and die from having no power and toughness. Create an XX blue and red weird creature token where X is the number of instant sorceries in your graveyard. Then you can return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Experimental Overload. This will not go to your graveyard. Mizzix Mastery, exile target card. That's an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. For each card that was exiled this way, copy it, and you can cast a copy without paying its mana cost. Exile Mizzix Mastery. The overload is what's important here for 8, more than 3. So for half the spell's cost total, you can get 1 card out of your graveyard, or with overload, you can get all the instants and sorcery cards. Long resolve time, I've done this, but it's so worth it. You will effectively draw the last half of your library and potentially mill yourself out. It's possible when it's this late in the game and you have 8 mana. You can draw into so many cards and opportunities. The only thing that sets us back at this point when we've cast this is the fact that we won't have enough mana to play everything that we're going to be drawing. So we're effectively going to be discarding and drawing the rest of what we have, or that we've drawn that turn, if we do not have infinite hand size on the board. But that's okay. It's definitely a very fun and impactful card when you get it off. The reward is essentially casting the burn spells that are in your graveyard to help win the game at that point in time. One of those burn spells specifically would be Refuse, and it would deal damage to target spell's controller equal to that spell's converted mana cost. If we are able to cast the Mizzix Mastery at instant speed and have everything resolve, we can potentially, if it's resolving on the stack, we can have the Refuse target someone else's spell that they had played prior to Mizzix Mastery. So it's very niche win con, but I like it because it's in reaction to someone's big spell like a Cyclonic Rift. They're going to cast a 7-drop spell that will remove all your non-land permanents from your board back into your hand, right? And there's not much you can do about that besides a counter spell. This, I feel, will be... So you play Mizzix Mastery, you're copying all the spells in your graveyard, you have Refuse in your graveyard for 8. You're casting Refuse with deals damage equal to the 7-drop, which is the Cyclonic Rift. And then you're copying it with Aftermath, or excuse me, with any of the copy spells that are here in your graveyard, like a Galvanic Iteration, and you cast this with your next instant or sorcery spell, you copy it, you choose new targets for the copy. That would put somebody at 14 damage right back to them for removing all your permanents back to your board. Yeah, it's a little niche with Mizzix Mastery here, but you can still do it regardless with just these two in combination with each other. They're very helpful. Iteration having flashback. If you even pay 5, you can do a copy twice. It's pretty cool. I like that. I like that spell a lot. Flood of Reconciliation. Any instant or sorcery card from your graveyard back to your hand. Exile Flood of Reconciliation. Runic Repetition. Return target exiled card with flashback you own to your hand. Mentioned this earlier, Past in Flames. Instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard will gain flashback until end of turn, and the flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. It also has flashback. Flashback, flashback, flashback. I'll stop saying. And we have all of our lands here, and ramp that we'll go through. Let's see, let's start with the ramp. So we've got Thought Vessel for infinite hand size. He taps for 1 mana. Simian Spirit Guide's pretty cool. It's a body, yeah, it's a 2/2, but you're going to be in this situation where you're going to say, oh man, I wish I had 1 more mana. Simian Spirit Guide has helped me more the times than it probably should in probability's sake. 1 in 100, it's just helped me in a lot of situations in this deck where I'm like, man, I need 1 more mana. Oh, look, I just drew into Simian Spirit Guide. Here we go. Here's my 1 more mana. You can't play an additional land for turn. This is just helpful where you can actually ramp yourself up for just temporary 1. I know people don't like me to use the word ramp a lot, so I should just come up with a new word for temporary mana fix that helps me impulsively, and it's just, there's so many words for it that you just throw into just, it ramps me for 1 temporarily. Storm Skrillex, instant sorcery is going to cost me 1 less, but he also has the prowess trigger of whenever I cast instant or sorceries, well, not non-creatures, so I guess it's not a prowess trigger. Cast instant or sorceries, you'll get a 2/0 until end of turn. Pretty great on a flyer, even though he's a 5-drop, still pretty good. Goblin Electromancer, OG from Return to Ravnica. Instant and sorcery spells will cost me 1 less, that's helpful. Armory Sphere, I can sack it and search for 2 basics, put them into my hand. Environmental Sciences, search for a basic, gain 2 life. Renegade Map, comes in tapped, but then you'll sack it on your next turn you have it. Search for a basic, put it into your hand. Prismatic Lens, tap 2 for 1 mana, or excuse me, pay 2, and tap for 1 mana. Path of Ancestry, because you're going to be casting Rielle so many times, probably 3 to 4. I've cast her sometimes 5, but it's worth it. She comes back bigger and badder every time. It comes in tapped, and then you'll scry every time you cast a creature in your color's commander's identity. So anytime you're casting creatures using Path of Ancestry, you'll go, or excuse me, shares a creature type. So it'll be wizards, effectively, which we have quite a few in here. You'd be scrying when you're casting wizards. And then Remote Isle, Desert of the Mindful, Desert of the Feverent. These are cycle lands, so you'll pay the cycle ability of 2, and then you'll go ahead and toss these in the graveyard with Rielle out. You'll draw a card off of the card you discard, and then you'll draw a card off of the cycle ability. So you effectively draw 2 cards for just cycling a couple lands that you don't need, if you don't need them. You probably will, but you never know when you need to search for answers or a body for a blocker. Ash Barrens is pretty good too, so you'll search for a land to fix you if you really need it, and then you'll also draw a card off of it with Rielle. Riptide Laboratories, same thing as Recalibrate, but just on a land. We're going to return the wizard we control to our hand to save them. Our Harmonic Prodigy or Rielle. Reliquary Tower, I got a nice promo foil one here for Love Your LGS event. That's awesome. Of course, maximum hand size, and then Spellbook, maximum hand size. But this video was a lot longer than I would honestly intend it to be, but to thoroughly just dive into each card and how it impacts the deck, how it makes the deck work, function, and in relation to how the deck pilots and what we're able to do in certain settings of the game, and how we're able to not necessarily react to situations, because let's be real, this is a solitaire deck. We're playing our own strategy, our own game plan. We're looking at getting into as much cards as we can possibly loot through, which is drawing and discarding, and utilizing all this to accelerate Rielle to be a big bad creature, hit with flying damage, hit with first strike trample damage with Rielle. Utilize our flyers that we've made from Wonder in the Graveyard to swing in with damage. Have a bunch of 2/2s. Cast a bunch and chain a bunch of instant or sorcery cards from our graveyard and deal a bunch of damage that way. We've got casting all of our spells for as cheap as we possibly can with as much ramp as we really can allow in this deck to function, so that way we can continuously just churn out our library and get massive value. But that's all I got for this video. I'm going to be doing about one video a week with deck techs from now on. Typically, when I do a deck tech, that deck will be then effectively for sale either at the LGS or on Instagram. You can catch me at Colt Gray MTG on Instagram. That's CULTGREYMTG on Instagram. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. You have any recommendations, please let me know. I'm always looking to be a better brewer and, genuinely make it a good experience for everyone I play Magic with, whether that's my attitude, whether that's the deck I bring, whether that's, in these times, the jokes we tell. But that being said, I really hope you all have a wonderful day. I appreciate you guys listening and tuning in, and I'll see you next week.